I'm Shane Castle from Centrilogic, and I'm joined by Joao Moura from CrewAI. Just go a bit over about Centrilogic briefly. We're an IT services firm based in Canada. We've been in business for just about 20 years, serving 300 customers, and we provide all levels of service in the stack. Today's focus is on AI and Agentic AI, but we're a full-service IT shop, and I'll be talking more about how Centrilogic can help you with your Agentic AI journey after Joao talks us through the CrewAI platform and what CrewAI has to offer. So just what we'll be talking about today, Joao will be talking about Crew, the option journey, CrewAI Enterprise, and then we'll be wrapping up with questions. And at this point, Joao, I'll hand it over to you if you'd like to share and take it away.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. Hey there, everyone. Very excited to be here and to see such an audience kind of like coming together to talk about AI agents. There's just a lot going on in the market right now. And I think like one of the things that as I was thinking about some of the things to share with you all today, probably the most important thing is what is noise and what is signal. Because whenever you look around on social network or you talk with people, everyone's talking about AI agents. And it's hard for companies right now, especially if they're trying to make decisions on like, hey, how I can use this technology to actually have an impact on my business, understand, is this real and how hard it is? What should I know? What people should be involved with and everything in between, right? I think that can get a lot of like analysis paralysis going to some extent. So I think there's a few things that is worth sharing with you, and I'm going to share my screen in a second. But I want to talk about one, give a quick intro to CrewAI, but then two, what is actually happening out there? What is the state of AI agents nowadays? What are people doing and what it's working? This is going to be kind of like a choose your own adventure kind of like presentation. So bear with me. We're going to jump a few slides, but I want to make sure that you kind of like get the cream de la crop of kind of like the information that is necessary for you. I do like to start with a number, and that number is 60 million. What for me is absolutely insane because that's the number of AI agents we're running per month now. And when I say that, it's like it's a big number but small number the same way. It's such an early days for this market, but at the same point, I think a lot of people don't realize that this is happening. Like this AI agents is not something that is kind of like far along in the future, but actually something that people are actually using. And you're seeing these customers actually get it to value on that. And you might be wondering like, well, all right, how a company like Crew gets to power 60 million agents? And I could say that is about our framework. I could say that is about our enterprise solution, but I truly believe that's about the ecosystem and kind of like what the ecosystem is kind of like becoming. Because yes, we build the company and the framework and the enterprise solution around it, but then we realized that a lot of people needed to get educated, and then we started doing these courses with deep learning AI. There turns out to be amazing courses. I definitely recommend them. There's over 150,000 engineers that got educated through that. But then these people like they just don't want to get educated, right? They want to like show the world that they're now qualified for this. And we're now seeing many people like Andrew here from IBM that actually kind of like took the courses, got certified, and now like have thousands of people that are certified on that. And then with the certifications that came the jobs, right? And now we are seeing specific jobs like Amazon that is hiring specifically for people that have kind of like CrewAI knowledge. And that has been also a very interesting experience. And everything that we do is kind of like inviting these people in this community to chat and kind of like understanding what are the challenges from bringing these things from prototypes into kind of like large production deployments and everything that comes with that, right? And for us, this sounds and looks and feels way more than running a company and creating a company, and it's more about an entire new industry from what we're seeing out there. And if you do this right, then you start to get messages like this, where you see folks from like Magma reaching out and say like, hey, we have done open source and I want to talk about enterprise. Or folks from Wells Fargo that would say, hey, I try your open source and love it, now I want to talk about enterprise. or even like friends from Databricks that would say like, hey, 50 of our biggest accounts are now actually using CrewAI, like AB InBev, AT&T, Glaxo, MasterCard, United Health, and many others. So it has been a very interesting experience overall. Adoption in over 150 countries, basically focus on the commercial side on kind of like bigger companies and enterprises, Global 2000, Fortune 500, but seeing adoption on SMB as well, and doing major partnerships, including Centrilogic and a few others. And that has been very exciting for us in general. Now, you might be wondering the companies that are running these agents and what they look like. These are some of them, and we can talk about some of them in a second. But it has been very exciting to see some of the results companies like PwC are getting. So you can watch more, and I can send this like over to you at some point so you can actually scan it and read yourself. But this is an interview that I made with their huge CTO and how they're using agents to basically create code for them. Very interesting. We love working with them and having them as customers. And even other companies like Gelato, that's more on the smaller side with like 500 people, give it or take, but they're completely reinventing themselves using AI agents. So couldn't vouch more for another very interesting kind of like use case or set of use cases. And they have done some amazing things within their company as well. So in the end of the day, enough about a crew. Let's talk about the state of AI agents. That you know like how this applies to your business, right? Well, right now we're tracking companies in 5 different levels. So there's companies they're like starting on the level one and they're just curious and trying to understand how to go about these things, all the way to companies on level five. And I gotta say, five now it's very aspirational. There's no one in there. I think even fourth, there's like a very small subset of companies that are actually getting in there. Most of the companies are level two or three, where they either are starting POCs or they have some agents in production and they're expanding. And that's kind of like where we engage with them and we really double down with them. And that's where like partners like Centrilogic and can really help basically expanding, get those initial wins, get confidence and kind of like what you're doing. So you expand from there. So that is basically what we're seeing the most like level of success right now with these companies. But I do believe that this year is going to be a year where we're going to see a lot more companies going from two, three to four, and eventually five. And I think that's going to be a very interesting kind of like journey for them. Now, the way that this journey looks like initially is it starts the discovery process where companies want to understand how to use the stack, right? And that involves experimentation, that involves technical enablement, that involves education. And usually these companies they come up with great questions.
Yeah.
And questions will be around memory, will be about a RAG or events and how they open source tools. And those are great. But the problem is how that is commodity. Like memory is something that you're going to need for your agents, yes. And there's probably 100 different ways that you can do it. That doesn't matter as much as other things. And the reason why I mean that is because after you understand that you're going to need the stack and you go to this phase where you understand that you're going to be agentic native. What is just a fancy way of saying you're going to have hundreds or maybe thousands of agents running in a production environment. Then the questions become way more interesting because now it's less about the memory. It's about, well, how do I build this? How do I make this in a way that it's scalable? How do I give access? What about governance? What about observability? And all those things in between. And it's by then that you realize that, all right, I don't need, it's not that I don't need open source or I don't need these things, but I need something more. I need an enterprise suite for all these agentic resources. And this idea of a suite is something that we have been giving a lot of thinking on. Is not that it's not one product. It's the idea of a stack. There's a stack that is being created around this idea of being this agent into production. And when we're talking about agentic resources, we're not talking about only the agents themselves. We're talking about their tools. We're talking about authentication. You're talking about permissioning, authorization, and everything in between. And it starts all the way on the data management level. Like if you really start to thinking about it, well, you're gonna have a Databricks, you're gonna have a Snowflake, you're gonna have a big crowd, you're gonna have this data that is living somewhere, and then it works its way through the LLMs and the orchestration and the memory all the way to the agentic apps. And the agentic apps here is kind of like that outmost layer where you can actually interact with these agents on the UI, and it's something that you can share kind of like with people either internally or externally. But it doesn't matter like what you choose for the stack. There's three things that these companies really care about, and you should as well. And that is this idea of interoperability. Like whatever I build, I want to make sure that I'm not get a vendor locked. I want to make sure that I can kind of like reap and replace. So if I'm using CrewAI authentication and scoping features, that's great. But if I want to slot that out and slot Okta in, I should be able to do it. If I'm using OpenAI for some of my use cases, but Anthropic launches a new model that's better for coding use cases, I want to be able to slot OpenAI out and adding kind of like Claude in or whatever that might be in certain use cases. So interoperability is a key thing here. Observability is also important, and not only observability but even evaluation is becoming something way more custom with agents now. I think for companies that already have been doing kind of like LLM kind of like functionality, they understand the value of observability and traces and evaluation sets. But when you're going into agents now, I think that's gaining a new grain or a new level of customability. Because right now, if you really think about it, the way that you're going to measure success for an agent is not necessarily by monitoring hallucinations or things like that, but it's something very, very, very custom. So if you're thinking about like, hey, I have like a lead scoring agent that's going to research these companies and reach them with data, score them so I can prioritize them on their high yield kind of like focus accounts. Well, success here should be matching that to closed won opportunities, right? So again, a very more custom success and evaluation metric than what you would do with regular ad hoc LLM calls. And then the final thing I would say is governance. That can mean so many different things for so many different companies, but it's very important here. It goes over this not only security side of things, but this idea that people only get access to data that they can, and that adding agents to the mix there don't create new vectors of attack or new vectors to actually allow people to basically get exposed to things they're not supposed to, and how you run this into a secure computing environment. So a very interesting idea of this idea of the stack and kind of like what it's coming to be. In a lot of the work that we are doing in CrewAI maps to that, right? From integrating with like the data lakes and data providers to integrating with any LLM to allowing you to use any open source framework to having this memory and knowledge layer in the control plane platform, and now those different layers on top. So there's a lot of work that we have been doing in that sense. So given all that, I want to make a quick break here and make sure that I show you the platform, because I can keep talking forever, but I think that seeing is better. So let me stop sharing for a second. Uh, so first of all, welcome to CrewAI Enterprise. This is what the platform looks like and what most of these customers are using nowadays to kind of like build and deploy their agents. Now, this is an account that we actually use. So you're going to see a lot of different use cases right in here. You're going to see things like onboarding, following up on email, preparing for a meeting, content marketing, reviewing code, monitor infrastructure. There's a lot of many use cases in here. But after a nice onboarding, usually what people are looking for is how do I build my agents? How I get this thing going for me? And there's three different ways you can do it. One, you can use open source that you kind of like already know if you're somewhat technical, so that fits more of a technical persona. Two, we do have a marketplace now where we have built-in templates, and we now have partners like Centrilogic as well that is building templates, and we're bringing them into here. So you're going to have like legal templates, you're going to have marketing, support, sales, a bunch of them right in there that you can use them. And you can also build them with CrewAI Studio. That is pretty good. And we have a new version that we have been working now, and I'd love to show this because it's so damn interesting, where you can chat your way into an automation. You can say like, I have regular meetings, I'd love to have a tool that gives me someone's email. It pulls all the emails with this person and gives me a report. And there you go. It automatically builds what you have on the right here, where you have your agents and you have your Gmail and you have your integration. And this is a great way for you to kind of like get those initial use case going, and kind of like get some of those things started. But eventually, as you can like expanding into more complex use cases, you're gonna get into, hey, I might need custom integrations. I have my own homegrown applications, and how do I integrate with that? And that's where we find like partners like Centrilogic like can really come in and kind of like help you get like that almost kind of like outmost kind of like level of perfection on the results that you can get. But once that you have like these things here built out and you can deploy them, well, then so what? Like what you can do with that? There's quite a few things. First thing is this becomes an API. So if you're a technical, you can basically integrate it with anything. But there's other ways that you can also use it. You basically can turn this into a chat right away where you can chat with this agent right in here, and you can even publish this in an app, and now this is going to be available for people within your company so they can actually kind of like use this, or even publicly if you want to. And as you chat with it, again, this is kind of like that same crew that can pull data from Gmail. So I say like, hey, can you do a research on this email specifically? And it does a research, it finds all the information, finds all the content, and gives me an entire report for me to go into a meeting with this person, for example. But not only you can chat with them in here, there's way more that you can do with them out of here as well. So now you can actually bring those groups of agents and those automation use cases into your Slack or even your Teams integrations. So there's some settings in here where you can basically allow people to chat with this directly on their app. And there's so much more. You can dive into executions, and on the executions, you can zoom in on metrics. There's traces, observabilities, there is like tool calling, and you can get very deep on the raw events. So for the technical people, this is basically chef's kiss, allows them to do all the debugging and understanding on how the systems are working. More important though is that you can also zoom out, meaning that you can see overall metrics about your agents. Things like, hey, how well they are performing, right? What is their quality? Are they getting any hallucination and what that might look like? So there's a lot of features around that as well, where you can basically come in here and let me pull metrics from last month, where you can see some of those metrics and kind of like monitor your progress over that. Now, there's more things around tool metrics, tasks metrics, quality, and even ROI that you can enable at some point. So this allows you to have a very strong grip on kind of like understanding like what is the value that I'm getting from having these agents actually run in a production environment, and should I be doubling down on like a specific use cases versus not. And again, there's more things. You can run these things on a schedule. You can test and train these agents. There are deployments that you can roll back. There's many settings that you can change as well, and even logs that we actually integrate them with open telemetry, so you can push them anywhere, like Grafana, Loki, Splunk, OpenSearch, you name it. So again, it's kind of like the IT team's like dream setup for streamlining the adoption, while giving less technical people a way to build and using these agents across their enterprise. And there's so many more features that we won't be able to cover just because it's like it's too much. But we can talk about things like integrations. That's something that I'm very excited about. We have an entire new set of integrations that we have been working on and launching. So again, you saw Gmail, but there's Calendar, Asana, Box, Salesforce, Zendesk, Jira, Linear, Notion. There's many that are coming now online. This idea of an internal registry. So let's say that Centrilogic can come in and build an internal integration for some of your homegrown applications. And now your entire team, technical and non-technical, can use that to integrate with the agents that they're building, either on the UI or also kind of like on the code. That's pretty good. There's an agent repository where you can reuse these agents across many different use cases. There's just a lot going on in there, and we're very proud of it. So let me actually click pause on here because again, I can talk about CrewAI forever, but I want to make sure that I give the mic back to Shane so that we can talk about Centrilogic as well. And eventually, if there's any questions, I'm also available to answer them. So Shane, mic's back to you.
So we are here to help build, implement, and deploy these solutions. So we're very happy to be partnering with CrewAI, and we follow the Success by Design implementation framework, where we'll come in and put a project together, define a scope, provide guidance and our experience in these kind of projects, and deliver and deploy. So what does that typically look like? We scope out a project. We can work with projects that are just a few weeks to multiple months or a very large program. So it really depends on the depth that you want to go. But we'll walk through these phases, identifying use cases, getting early wins is very important. If you're getting set up in CrewAI Enterprise, getting that deployed, getting security and policies defined, and getting things working for end users. A few areas where we can help specifically. Creating, if you have, you want to set up CrewAI Enterprise, we got just a little bit of noise there.
Perdón, ¿qué me decís?
Somebody can mute there, please. Yeah, and so governance. Governance is very important. We work with financial services firms, manufacturing firms, insurance, data security. When you implement these, getting the process, CrewAI has the platform, and we can help get that integrated into your environment. We've been working with complex IT environments for many decades, and getting your data platform ready. To really leverage a lot of the use cases we see, particularly financial services and manufacturing, is getting access to corporate data and leveraging that with CrewAI. So getting the right access to the right people is the kind of project we can help put together. API access, whether it's MCP, and maybe Joao, if you can talk a bit about MCP in a bit, if it comes up, having the ability to Crew to control existing line of business applications is a really exciting frontier that we're working with. We are a Microsoft partner as well, and we work very closely with the Microsoft ecosystem. So getting things plugged in to the Microsoft stack is something that we work with closely as well. You may have documents in SharePoint that you want CrewAI to access. And then lastly, one of our big service areas is once you deploy this, if your organization does not have the skill set to maintain this on an ongoing basis, we'd be happy to become your long-going, on-term managed service provider, where we will maintain your CrewAI environment, help you deploy new agents, keep the agents you have working. If there's any kind of issues, as these agentic solutions become more and more central to everyday business, they become critical resources in the company and need to be treated as key IT services. So that's if you do have, I'll put this out later, but Joao, I'll turn it back over to you if you wanted to have more content or take questions.
Yes, I think there's more content that we can cover in here. I'm also reading some of the chat as well to see a little bit of like what we can touch on. But yes, to your point, MCP has been something that we're seeing a lot out there. I think what is happening is everyone in the industry understand that there's value and have standards that we can follow, and everyone wants to get to those standards pretty quickly. I think right now, if you ask me, MCP has kind of like an initial front lag, and that's interesting. So do A2A, but there's no clear winner just yet. I think like what you can see is like all the hyperscalers are kind of like trying to look at this as like, hey, if I win the standard, then that might mean better business for me. What I don't think might be necessarily true. But we definitely see AWS really pushing for like MCP, but Google and Microsoft partnering on A2A also makes a very compelling case. In the end of the day, we need to support everything, right? We just talked about interoperability and how that's important. So right now, any crew that you deploy in CrewAI Enterprise can become an MCP server, and any MCP server that you have can be used by Crew agents. So at the end of the day, that works by default. And we do have integrations with AWS Bedrock natively, and we also have a new integration that we're launching with Azure Foundry AI. So you can also integrate with Microsoft in that way. Let me go back and share my screen real quick, because there is a little more content that we want to go over with you all, specifically around use cases that I think might be very relevant. So that in case you're wondering like, hey, what should I do? We want to make sure that we cover that. We saw LLMs getting adopted on the edges of the organization up to this point, where it's interesting. People would get this interesting idea and they would use ChatGPT and basically kind of like start using that 100 times a day. And that created a bunch of kind of like issues, right? There is a problem of information being leaked. There's this knowledge was not being shared across the organization. And now what we're seeing with like agents is more of a central deployment where you get to control like what are the LLMs, you can filter PII, sensitive data, you control the use cases, and allows you to basically decide when to enable different departments with either code or no code. That's kind of like a similar, a better pattern that we're seeing out there. In terms of implementations, you do can see people getting to even more than 90% efficiency gain. So one of our customers is actually a huge CPG company. They own around 630 different kind of like beverage brands across the globe. And they have use cases that are getting like 97% efficiency gains. And efficiency here is measuring how much time I used to spend on this before, how much time I'm spending on this now. And they're doing that while still keeping a 94% accuracy. And the accuracy here was measured by having the humans keep doing the process and agents doing it and comparing those results. So it's very interesting to see that you can get a huge gains if you do this right, especially a lot of these back office automations that businesses really depends and run on a day-to-day basis. Now, one thing that I will say, and that makes for interesting business, is that there's no clear winner on the vertical and horizontal. So we're seeing a lot of financial industries really kind of like investing on this, insurance companies like spending time on this. As I mentioned, CPGs, but also telecoms and computing. So it's interesting to see that again, it's cross a vertical, and then within those verticals, we also are seeing people doing all sorts of automations. There's sales, there's marketing, there's cybersecurity. There's definitely a preference for back office use cases, I would say. And by back office, what I mean is more like not user facing use cases at first. I think most of the companies want to get comfortable with those things into a more kind of like protected environment before they actually get these things to interact with their like customer bases. But there's no clear kind of like pattern. It's all about the custom use cases that we're seeing by now. There's some pitfalls that you should be watching for. So one is a lot of people and companies, they don't spend enough time planning their use cases, and that can be a huge problem. Two, there's no clear definition of what a success looks like. And I think these are some of the things where like Centrilogic can really help with as well, right? Because they are seeing and working with different customers of ours on kind of like how this works. They understand how to steer away some of those kind of like pitfalls. One of them is not breaking this process into smaller chunks. So usually people want to automate everything with one single agent and like giving them all the tools, and that doesn't really work right now. And I would say probably the fourth one is again not measuring and not evaluating. So how do you know like if these things are actually working and what success like means in terms of actual numbers that you can keep track of? That would be with some of those. Now, in terms of your use cases and how you should be thinking about them, we usually categorize them across two axes, complexity and precision. So you might have high complexity and high precision use cases. And a good example of that might be there is one use case that we're working on a bank that is automatically filling IRS forms. So definitely something that, I mean, high precision. You don't want to get those wrong. And those forms are very complex. We're talking about 60 pages long forms that come with instruction manuals that are 720 pages long. So it's like a very complex problem to tackle. But you also have like high complexity and low precision use cases that are very interesting. So one good example would be educational content. We are working with an educational company where they're using CrewAI agents to basically create educational material. And the way that this works is they again, it's complex because you want to make sure that you're breaking these teams into like smaller chunks. You want to make sure they're explaining in the way that it makes sense. You want to make sure they're customizing for the person and for the persona that is consuming that content. But it's low precision on the fact that there's no right or wrong on teaching, right? Like you as long as the person is getting that value and they're actually learning, there's no very specific way that you need to do it necessarily. So usually, some companies like to start on either low precision or low complexity, but there's also companies that want to go for like the high complexity, high precision use cases from the get go. Honestly, there's no right or wrong here. It's just that you need to be self aware about like you're going for high complexity, high precision. You should have some skill sets to help you with that, either internally or externally. We need to make sure that you are equipped to handle this non-deterministic kind of like use cases that comes with LLMs and agents. Now, a lot of people know CrewAI because of Cruise and this idea that, hey, I can use these agents to create these automations. And that is amazing because agents come with this idea of self-healing, come with this idea of like basically not being as brittle. And also this idea of the LLM controlling the flow of the application. So reacting to real-time data in a very efficient manner. But we also offer CrewAI flows that allows you to do like for more finer precision if you want to, where you might want to have some pocket of agents that are going to be doing something very creative, but at other points you might just want to write regular code to do more kind of like an if this then that kind of like approach, where you might pull some data from Salesforce and you say like I don't need an agent from that, or you pull some data from your Gmail and you say like I don't need an agent from that. But now that you have those two data sets, now you might want some agents to kind of like analyze and cross them. So allows you to have that finer control with kind of like building and state and everything, and has proven to be like super effective and super fast to build and run. So definitely recommend flows as well for certain use cases if you want to go there. Um, I already show you some of the platforms, so we can skip the video, but I want to talk about a few use cases real quick so that, again, you have those top of mind going out of this. One is coding automation is something that we are seeing, especially like this is a major use case for PwC, one of our customers. We're very public about it. So whenever they do ABAP or Apex, kind of like a project, so they go out and sell to these companies updating SAP and Salesforce projects. They actually have a group of CrewAI agents that are writing most of this code and are actually updating the code for you. So very interesting use case. We also have contract analysis proving to be very helpful on Telecon, where there's some contract optimizations that you can do that leads to amazing tax savings, but you can't do them with like legal teams just because that doesn't scale. But you can do if you power that legal team with a set of agents that kind of like do most of the heavy lifting. So that has been very interesting to see. I think customer support is a given. Many people kind of like see the value on that. I think where things get interesting is you can actually like the sky is the limit, right? You can bring so many sources into this. You can bring Zoom recordings, you can bring conversations. So it's not only, it doesn't need to be only close to your ticketing system. It can go beyond that into other data sources as well. And that has been very interesting to see. And then you have more complex use cases where you start to see some of those flows being applied. And I think Agentic OCR is a big one. So this is where you would see a lot of like insurances and legal and financial companies kind of like using cases like this because they have a lot of paper still. So not only letters and faxes, but even like money orders and checks, where before you would pay this company to do a bunch of OCR for you and digitalize that content, but now you can do so much more because you can not only do the OCR, but you can use multi-model to extract even more information. And then you can have agents look at historical data to decide how to classify that. Then you can use agents to route that to the right team and even kind of like take action on some of those. And that has been very interesting. And we're seeing other similar use cases for like similar companies as well. I think know your customer is kind of like something that everyone within kind of like finance and insurance is doing right now, and that is very interesting. And also a lot of kind of like any process around background checks has been like benefited from using agents as well. Well, my whole goal with here with this section is kind of like give you ideas and tell you about like what is working out there, like what are these companies actually using. So I do want to say thank you because I know that asking for kind of like close to an hour of your time on a Tuesday morning is a big ask, but I really try to make this very kind of like valuable to you, to the point that you basically kind of like understand more about how the market is going, what's working, what it's not. If there are any questions through the chat, I want to make sure that I get to them. I saw some people sharing some of our courses in there, so that feels good. I saw people asking about limitations in Crew AI. Well, I gotta say, it's less about limitations within Crew AI. It's more about limitations around like what are use cases that are good for undeterministic and like application, non-deterministic applications versus deterministic applications, right? Like 2+2 will always be 4, and there's no need to use an LLM for that. But if you want to do things that are more, if you really think about AI agents in the end of the day, there's 3 ways that they're manifesting value in the industry today. One is this idea of app building. So think Replit, Lovable, all those different things like Windsurf, Cursor, right? They can really build things for you, and there's proving. Then the other way that this agents start like becoming a reality is this idea of synthetics, and there's a bunch of companies that are doing that. Like I have a synthetic SDR, I have a synthetic BDR, and like that is something that seems to work, especially for like SMBs, because the process is very replicable and similar. And then the third way is kind of like this idea of process automations that we're talking a lot about today, in kind of like an RPA 2.0, right? Like these things can now do more. And when you think about as AI agents as automations, the main thing there is it had 2 features that are key to make these automations better. One is this ability that they now can create things. They can write the emails, they can create the images, they can do all that. And that unlocks a new set of use cases. But 2, and most important, is that they get to reason about how they're going to tackle that automation in runtime. So it's in real time. So it's not more like a bunch of ifs analysis to cover all the different edge cases, right? And allow those things to create way more kind of like custom and reliable automations. So when you think about limitations, I would say it's not any limitations on CrewAI per se, but it's more about limitations on use cases that are good fit for agents versus use cases that are not good fit for agents. So that would be my hot take there. Thank you for everyone that is talking about the courses. I really appreciate that. That has been great. How CrewAI provide interoperability and observation and governance? Well, interoperability, you can think about it for the sake that a few different things. One, we support any other framework. So you can literally bring a LangGraph agent, an OpenAI agent, in an AutoGem agent within a Crew, and that would still work. So there's no more interoperable than this. You can literally bring any other framework into this. I also like the fact that there's interoperability on other layers. So you can use any LLM, for example, and that would still work. You can host this enterprise platform on any cloud. So you can host this on AWS or Azure or GCP or even on-prem. So there's also that interoperability level on the infrastructure layer as well. So interoperability is applied across the entire stack, right? In terms of observation, again, there's elements of traces and traceability that you have and kind of like show them in the platform, but there's also like higher level metrics around quality, hallucinations, and even custom metrics that you can add that allows you to do that. And in terms of governance, there's a lot going on in there. It's some of them like quote unquote non sexy features, right? It's things that are not necessarily AI related. So ability to integrate with Entra, Okta, ability to do privacy sanitization. So use smaller models to remove PII before request goes out into bigger models and things like that. Or even use row levels base of access to kind of like control access to your agents and tools, or allowing these agents, once that you integrate with like Salesforce, for example, that on the runtime, the agent is adjusting its permissions according to the person that is running the agent. So those would be some of the features on the governance there. And then you ask if there are any big difference between enterprise and open source. Well, there's major differences, and it's not that they're not compactors. I think more about it's an open core, right? So the open source framework, you still want to use it and you still want to bring that on. It's just that the open source is very focused on engineers and allows you to build, while the enterprise comes around that and gives you the ability to deploy, manage, scale, and observe, and all those different things. Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing the course. Crew Studio is only on the enterprise, yes, but we do make that free, so you can create an account and use that for free. We have an old version of Studio that is available now, but we have this new version that is going to be on probably in the next couple weeks. It's very interesting. I'm using that a lot, and it's an amazing improvement from what we had before. You can use Langflow to kick off crews as well. Both Langflow and CrewAI integrates behind the scenes if you really want to. I have been liking the new Studio better, just because once that I can use the Studio, I deploy it right in here and get a chat UI, and I integrate direct in Slack, so that makes my life easier. Thank you everyone that is talking about the different things about CrewAI. What do developers plan in terms of scalability, reliability, and security? For example, if my email crew becomes widely adopted inside the company, how can I ensure that the performance responsibility don't look great as user grows? That's a great question. I think there's a few things, right? There's performance in terms of regular apps. When you're thinking about, hey, I want to make sure that as this API gets used more and more, how I make sure that it can sustain the load. There's performance in that sense, and we got you covered in there. So any deployments that you do on enterprise actually comes with a queuing system, a load balancer, auto scaling, SSL, data encrypted in transit, data encrypted on storage. So it can take a hit pretty well. And should be able to scale with that. Now, there's another element in here that I don't think is what you're asking, but it's important. And that is, how do you think about scaling in terms of functionality, right? So a lot of people, when this AI agents automations, they sometimes, if they don't have any evaluations on observations, they usually go into a state where you have a short blanket. So you have a set of features that you work, and then you add a few more. So you put the blanket to cover your head, and now your feet are code. And then you go back and you like cover your feet, and now your head's code. So you can end up on a short blanket situation if you're not familiar with building these things and you don't have a good observation and an evaluation kind of like framework around that. We have been doing a lot of thinking about that. We have some features on the enterprise, but we're adding even more. And it's something like Centrilogic has been seeing with many customers and helping them kind of like make sure they're doing the right way. So those would be some of the things that I would say in terms of scalability, reliability. In terms of security, there's a lot of work that we do in there. I can tell you how just last week we closed a deal with the DoD, the Department of the Defense in the US. So we have been cleared to operate under basically FedRAMP, like high environment servers. Meaning that we have gone through a lot of scrutiny in terms of security for some of the images that runs kind of like the enterprise platforms. Now, we still have a long way to go. We're still doing so much work in there. All right, SOC 2, Type 2, make sure that we establish a proper kind of like a program for bug bounty and all that. So there's a lot of things that we're still doing in that as well, but there's a lot of good work. All right, I think that answers all the questions that we had. There's one final one. Does enterprise offer prompt optimization and evaluation to different LLMs? Yes, it does. That is a great question, actually. I love that feature. Let me see if I can show you an example real quick. Share screen, window. So here's an example of me testing two models where I'm testing GPT-4o Mini and O1. And again, you can see that between the two tasks, they basically had comparable performance other than in one run. The task number one, they got a slightly higher task, like a higher score. And you can see that the hallucination score here is very faithful. There was some of the reasonings around it. But in the end of the day, you might be better off with 4O Mini because one, it's cheaper, it's faster, way faster actually. Look at this, it's using less tokens as well. So again, a new model comes up and you want to compare this new model, you can just add this as an LM connection here on the menu on the left, and then you can basically choose and compare all those different models. And if you want to optimize prompts, yes, we do have this training feature that allows you to automatically kind of like train your agents. So they create memories that will self-optimize some of their prompts so they behave better. So here's an example where we basically have optimized some of the prompts behind the scenes, and you can see some of the suggestions that now get interpolated into that. So again, very interesting, kind of like couple features as well. Um, then there's a new question also, is Enterprise also built on top of Light LLM or built on your own proxy? So you can use Light LLM if you want to. You don't need to use their proxy or production feature for that. You can use just their open source Light LLM. And we do support your own custom proxy. So we have companies that they have built proxies themselves, right? Because they have this one single point where they're collecting all the prompts and doing all the evaluations in there. So we actually support that. As long as it complies with OpenAI standards, you should be able to do anything. All right, Shane, I think we covered a lot. This is definitely interesting.
I think it's been great. So to everyone on the call, Denise put a link to the survey in the chat. If you could please complete that, it means a lot to us to get feedback. Joao, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on today. And to anyone on the call, Centrilogic, we're very happy to work with you. If you have a project in mind, please reach out to us directly, and we'd be happy to work with you. And looking forward to the next even few months ahead. You know, everything's moving so fast.
I love that. Folks, thank you so much for coming, and I catch you online. Have a good one.